There are probably no three words more powerful during the transfer window than "here we go."
Ronald Araujo to Liverpool. Here we go. Here we go.
Here we go.
Here we go.
And, as always, here we go.
Once you hear those words, it usually means the transfer is official. Unless it's Joao Pedro to Newcastle, Ziyech to PSG, Ziyech to Al Nassr. Wow, Fabrizio needs a better source around this guy. Messi to renew at Barca, or a few others. They are the words that transformed Fabrizio from a relatively unknown Italian journalist to the biggest transfer reporter in the sport. Today, he has tens of millions of followers across Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and other platforms. During the transfer window, he's posting constantly, and he's turned that into an enormous personal brand. But over the last few years, something else has happened. More and more people have started turning against him. Other journalists have publicly criticized the way he operates. Fans have accused him of recycling other reporters' work. There have been questions about his relationship with agents and whether some of his posts are closer to promotion than actual journalism. Some online football communities like Reddit have even gone as far as restricting or banning posts from him entirely. You gotta love those Reddit mods. Peak joblessness. Now, depending on who you ask, Fabrizio Romano is either the hardest working transfer journalist in football, or he's built one of football's biggest media empires by completely blurring the lines between journalism, promotion, and content creation. And that's what makes this story so interesting, because everyone knows Fabrizio Romano, everybody knows "here we go," but the way the man behind those three words actually built his empire is a lot more complicated. Fabrizio's entire business is built around being first. Thousands of reporters are chasing the same stories, and sometimes being just 5 minutes earlier than everyone else can mean millions of views. And nobody has benefited more from that than Fabrizio. His "here we go" has basically become a stamp of approval, but that also created a problem, because what happens when you are so desperate to be first that you announce something before it's actually finished? Well, that's exactly what caused Fabrizio to beef with fellow journalist Florian Plettenberg over Yan Diomandé's transfer to Real Madrid in the summer of 2026. Fabrizio reported that Real Madrid had reached an agreement with RB Leipzig, gave the transfer his famous "here we go," and said that the Ivorian was traveling for his medical. Then Florian of Sky Germany came out and basically said, "Hold on, buddy, this thing isn't even close to being done yet." According to Florian's reporting, negotiations were still happening. The final fee hadn't been completely agreed, and there were still details left to sort out. And suddenly, two big transfer reporters were publicly telling millions of people completely different things. Then it got personal. These two were beefing on Twitter like troll accounts, going back and forth trading insults. Florian said that Fabrizio's reporting on Klopp was an insult to every reporter out there, and that his boner for being first was already exposed when he reported the Norway vs Brazil World Cup score before the game had finished. Then Fabrizio responded by threatening to expose Florian's direct messages to him, basically saying, "Buddy, you used to be a fan, now you think you got some big balls coming for me." But Florian did raise a criticism that many people have made about Fabrizio over the years.
Now, of course, there's pressure to be first, but for me, never at the expense of getting it right. I'd rather be slower or not report anything than make a mistake.
Does "here we go" always mean the transfer is actually finished? Or does it sometimes mean Fabrizio believes the deal is so likely to happen that he's willing to announce it early? Because there's a massive difference between something being 90% done and actually being done. If you wait until every document is signed, someone else might beat you to the story. But if you go early and the transfer eventually happens anyway, everyone remembers that you were first. Now, Diomandé did of course eventually join Real Madrid, but even Leipzig mocked Fabrizio with their post announcing Diomandé's departure, because nobody doubted if the move would happen. It was simply a question of when, not if. That's why Florian said that Fabrizio's reports are based on probability, not actual agreements. One of the biggest controversies surrounding Fabrizio was his coverage of Mason Greenwood. Greenwood was arrested in 2022 after some disturbing audio and images appeared online. He later faced charges of assault and controlling and coercive behavior, among some other terrible things. Those charges were eventually dropped in 2020 after prosecutors said that key witnesses had withdrawn and new material had come to light. But Manchester United still conducted their own internal investigation, and Greenwood ultimately continued his career away from the club. With him continuing to play football, that meant that journalists were going to report on him. But the criticism of Fabrizio wasn't simply because he mentioned Greenwood in his tweets. The issue was how often he posted about him and the way those posts were framed. As Greenwood started rebuilding his career away from Manchester United, Fabrizio regularly posted about his goals, performances, transfer interest, and potential moves. And critics started noticing something. If you only knew Greenwood from those posts, you would have absolutely no idea why his career at Manchester United ended in the first place. There was very little context about the controversy that completely changed his his career. Now, supporters of Fabrizio would argue that his job is to report on the football. How is he supposed to speak on a matter that was dismissed by the court? The guy wasn't found guilty. But critics accused Fabrizio of helping rehabilitate Greenwood's public image by repeatedly presenting him like any other exciting player on the transfer market. Some even went further, questioning whether Fabrizio's relationship with agents and representatives influenced the amount or tone of that coverage. This raised an uncomfortable question about Fabrizio Romano's platform. When you're that influential, are you simply responsible for reporting what happens? Or are you also responsible for thinking about what your coverage helps normalize? Because the whole Greenwood situation isn't the only time that Fabrizio got criticism for using his massive platform to shape public narratives. One of the first major investigations into Fabrizio's business model came in early of 2024 from Danish football magazine Tipsblad. The investigation focused on Swedish wonder kid Rooney Bardghji, who was at the time playing for FC Copenhagen. Fabrizio reported that Bardghji had been frozen out by the club because he refused to sign a new contract, portraying Copenhagen as standing in the player's way while suggesting Europe's biggest clubs should pay attention. FC Copenhagen strongly rejected that version of events. According to the investigation, the story had originated from people connected to Bardghji's representatives and was intended to increase public pressure on Copenhagen during contract negotiations. Tipsblad's editor, Troels Bæk Thorsen, argued that Fabrizio had acted less like an independent journalist and more like a communications channel for a player's agency. The investigation became even more controversial after it uncovered the activities of a company linked to Fabrizio called Memo. According to Tipsblad, Memo approached professional football clubs offering promotional packages involving Fabrizio's social media platforms. The proposal was straightforward. Clubs or player representatives could pay to have a specific player featured on Fabrizio's accounts, increasing their exposure and generating transfer buzz. Several club officials confirmed they had received these approaches. Now, there is some important context here. The story eventually went before the Danish Press Council, which found problems with parts of Tipsblad's reporting and resulted in corrections being made. But that didn't make the wider conversation disappear, because the bigger question was about the relationship between transfer journalists, agents, and clubs, and where exactly the line between journalism and promotion starts to disappear. Now, the criticism around Fabrizio isn't just about his relationship with agents. Over the last few years, there have also been questions about his commercial partnership with state-backed football projects, especially during Saudi Arabia's huge investment into the Saudi Pro League. As the public investment fund poured billions into bringing some of the biggest players in football over to the Desert League, Fabrizio became one of the league's biggest international voices. Alongside his normal transfer updates, he also posted professionally produced promotional videos that covered not only the Saudi Pro League, but wider projects connected to Saudi Arabia. According to reporting from The Telegraph, some of this content went well beyond normal football reporting. Instead of simply talking about transfers or what was happening in the league, some videos highlighted Saudi infrastructure projects and humanitarian initiatives. And that's where the line between reporting and promotion started to become a lot less clear. For critics, this created an obvious problem. If you're reporting on transfers including Saudi clubs while also producing promotional content connected to the same project, people are naturally going to question how independent your coverage really is. On the other hand, Fabrizio supporters would argue that this is simply how modern digital media works. Fabrizio is not just a traditional journalist anymore. He's also a massive online creator with his own business. And creators regularly work with leagues, clubs, and other commercial organizations. I'm still waiting for the Saudi League to send me a check. I'll gladly promote the league, guys. Just hit up my email. But that's really where the debate comes from. When you're both reporting on these organizations and working with them commercially, it becomes much harder for the audience to know where the journalism ends and the promotion begins. Now, Fabrizio's handling of personal tragedies opened up another can of worms. In July of 2025, football was devastated by the deaths of Liverpool forward Diogo Jota and his brother Andre Silva in a car crash in Spain.
Tragic news to bring you that Liverpool forward Diogo Jota has died in a road traffic accident in Spain. He was 28 years old.
Naturally, the football world basically stopped.
A young woman without his husband, the parents to lose both sons is crazy. It's difficult to understand.
Clubs, teammates, former teammates, and players from around the world posted tributes to the brothers. Fabrizio covered the story as well. But what made people uncomfortable was the sheer amount of content. Rather than posting one or two updates and leaving it there, critics pointed to a long stream of posts surrounding the tragedy and the tributes that followed.
5, 6, 63, 64, 91, 92.
It's time to stop! It's time to stop, okay?
And some of those posts were not even Fabrizio sharing the original tribute. He would take screenshots of statements or posts from other people and upload them directly onto his own page. That's an important difference, because when you repost someone's original post, you're sending people towards their account. When you screenshot it and upload it yourself, all of that engagement stays on your page. And considering Fabrizio's entire business is built around social media engagement, you can understand why people found that uncomfortable. Now, nobody can definitively say what his personal motivation was from those posts alone, but the optics were terrible. And this wasn't the first time Fabrizio had been criticized for the way he handled an extremely sensitive situation. After the devastating Turkey-Syria earthquake in 2023, former Newcastle player Christian Atsu was initially reported to have been rescued alive. Fabrizio shared that information. The problem was that the situation was still extremely confusing, and those early reports turned out to be wrong. Atsu was later confirmed to have passed away. Again, it comes back to the same problem that follows Fabrizio throughout his career: speed. His entire reputation has been built around getting information out immediately. During the transfer window, getting something wrong might mean announcing a transfer that doesn't happen. There's tons of here we go fails, but when you're dealing with an earthquake or the death of a player, the consequences of rushing information are completely different. The other problem people have is that over the years, many fans and journalists argue that Fabrizio's biggest strength is not necessarily breaking stories himself, it's just being the first person to amplify someone else's work to a much larger audience. Local reporters often spend weeks building relationships with clubs, agents, and sources before finally breaking a transfer story. But because Fabrizio has one of the biggest platforms in football journalism, those exclusives can quickly become his story instead. Another criticism is aimed at Fabrizio's sheer volume of content. Because transfer news drives enormous engagement on social media, Fabrizio posts constantly throughout the day. The result, according to many people, is a flood of updates that often contain very little genuinely new information. Instead of major developments, you just see posts saying negotiations are ongoing, clubs remain interested, talks are advancing, or discussions will continue in the coming hours. While these are technically accurate, the updates don't move the story forward in any meaningful way. Fabrizio Romano's rise and all the criticism that has followed says a lot about how football media has changed. This guy understands the internet better than almost anyone else. Football fans don't want to wait until tomorrow morning to find out what's happening with a transfer. They want updates immediately. Fabrizio turned the transfer window into something people follow every single day of the year, and it works. He's built an absolutely massive global brand. But the same things that help Fabrizio become so successful are also the things that have created so much criticism around him. Because once you're managing an audience of tens of millions of people, working with agents, talking directly to players and clubs, producing sponsored content, and constantly competing for engagement, the line between journalist and influencer starts becoming very blurry. If you enjoyed this video, I'm sure you will love this one too. Check it out right here.